Phil Spencer, the king that he fucking is, and let me just reiterate that Phil Spencer is an absolute king of a human being. Okay.
Oh yeah, he's awesome.
What was I saying? He did an interview with Kotaku that has a lot of interesting points about it. So, as we touched on last week, Xbox
Got games.
They got games, yeah. They acquired Zenimax Studios for $7.5 billion, the largest deal in video game history. Huge news. So Phil Spencer sat down with Stephen Totilo at Kotaku to discuss this. Okay. And I know there's a couple of points in here that we want to talk about. Okay. I'm not going to go through the whole article. I suggest people read it if they want to. I think there's a lot of interesting points in it that he brings up that they discuss. But I know there's kind of like 3 or 4 main things that we want to specifically talk about.
Yep.
Okay. So let me hit you with this one first, Brett. Okay. Since our preferred platform is PlayStation,
Sony always wins.
Even though we both also have Xboxes,
And I got games.
right? And we have PCs and Switches and everything like that. We favor PlayStation platform, but we're obviously still Xbox fans and consumers. Okay.
That's right.
So Stephen Totilo, this Kotaku person, asked Phil Spencer specifically, since it's such a large investment, quote, is it possible to recoup a $7.5 billion investment if you don't sell Elder Scrolls 6 on PlayStation? Okay. End quote. Then Phil Spencer quickly replied, yes. And then he kind of like not corrected himself, but kind of re-interjected because he just, slip of the tongue. It just kind of came right out there. And then he said, quote, I don't want to be flip about that. This deal was not done to take games away from another player base like that. Nowhere in the documentation that we put together was how do we keep other players from playing these games. We want more people to be able to play games, not fewer people to be able to play games. But I'll also say in the model, I'm just answering directly the question that you had. When I think about where people are going to be playing and the number of devices that we had, and we have xCloud and PC and Game Pass and our console base, I don't have to go ship those games on another platform other than the platforms that we support in order to kind of make the deal work for us, whatever that means, end quote.
Okay.
So what does that mean?
It means that Phil wasn't trying to take Bethesda games away from Sony players, PlayStation players with this deal. Mm-hmm. And I think that Phil has a history of this. Like, he's not just talking out of his ass. He's always been very open to the fact that he wants people to play games wherever they can play them, the easiest way they can play them.
He beats that like a dead horse.
Absolutely. One of the top things I remember from this topic here is Phil Spencer on Twitter. Someone tweeted him and they said, I canceled my pre-order for Gears because you made the game available on PC. And Phil replied and said, you're canceling your pre-order because more people get to play the game? That's pretty sad, or something like that.
Console war bullshit is so abysmal, dude.
It's really bad. So that's the kind of guy Phil is, and that's the kind of guy he's always been. And it's why I like him, because he's so upfront. He's so cool about it. He's open to putting his games on Switch. They let Ori and the Blind Forest and Cuphead both go onto the Switch. He's not trying to... Listen, console exclusives are important, and they help sell your systems. They're still in the console game, so they still want to sell these consoles, and they're still going to have console exclusives, or at least Windows and console exclusive. So yeah, he still has those, but he's not going to try to purposely take a game away from gamers, especially if they know like Bethesda is such a huge studio with so many franchises. I can't see Phil being like that. Although this does mean he could very well say no Bethesda games.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think he was just being very matter of fact about it. He's like, we made this deal, right? We acquired the studio, right? These studios. When one of these studios ships a game, we have our ecosystem that they will be released on, right? He wasn't saying that doesn't mean that PlayStation is not going to also be released on PlayStation. They could absolutely publish it there if they want to, as long as PlayStation is fine with it, right? Since it would technically be an Xbox studio game, right?
Yep.
It's the same thing where if like, if we were on the flip side of it talking about PlayStation, PlayStation's releasing, I don't know, Horizon Zero Dawn 2. They don't have to release that on Xbox, right? to
No.
that's not part of their ecosystem. But you do see PlayStation releasing some of their games on PC, right? So I think it's the same thing. Xbox doesn't need to recoup their losses by releasing their game on a platform that's not theirs. That's not saying that they won't do it, but he's just saying he doesn't need to make up the money.
Exactly. That's what I was just going to say. He says at the end there, he doesn't have to ship the game on PlayStation for the deal to make sense, for the acquisition to make sense. Right. He can ship it on just Game Pass, just console, Xbox, and just PC, and be fine. But I think the point of that is he's not that kind of guy, and he wouldn't do that. Just hold it back, you know?
Yeah, and I does it mean that we're not going to see some of these games on PlayStation at launch? Maybe. There's been no confirmation of that. He said, which I don't necessarily believe, he said that there's nothing in the deal with those studios that said that they couldn't publish, like that they won't publish on other platforms. I think there was probably definitely conversations about that when you acquire these third-party studios. But I don't think that's necessarily going to mean, and I don't think it's necessarily at the forefront of like Phil's mind of like, oh, we can't release these games on PlayStation because they're ours. That's not Phil Spencer. If you ever listen to that man speak or see anything that he has done as the head of Xbox, that is not what he is about.
Absolutely. All. And there's even a game that's a PlayStation 5 console launch exclusive. Not console launch. The game is launching first on PlayStation 5. I believe it's called Deathloop. Yeah. And although it was delayed until next year, I believe, it is still going to launch on PlayStation 5 first, which is interesting because it's now an Xbox studio game.
But they're honoring that deal.
Yep.
You know? I actually think the flip side of this could be that PlayStation has a really bad track record with working with other companies. They just really do. I think the flip side of this would almost be PlayStation being like, no, we're not going to release those games on our platform because they're Xbox studios. More likely than Xbox doing that.
I agree. I think that's more likely than Xbox doing it. Yeah,
that's me. I could totally see Sony being like, nah, fuck you.
We have no interest in launching the Elder Scrolls 6 on our PlayStation 5 console.
Yeah,
Thank you for asking.
Yeah, this is actually the best place to play, and I don't know if you've seen it, but we're called PlayStation, not Xbox. So yeah.
Yeah, if you're interested in the Elder Scrolls 6, you can play that on the Xbox systems, but over here we have Final Fantasy 16, so you can play that on PlayStation consoles.
Yeah, if Don Matrick was running Sony, he'd be like, yeah, we have a place where you can play that. It's called the Xbox One X or Series X.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then one of the big things, with the Series X, that we touched on last week, so I won't hammer it home too much. But another interesting part of this article is the interview brought up the fact that Halo Infinite is not a launch title anymore, which now even as many studios as Xbox has now, they're gonna have a very poor or lacking launch lineup of games, in my opinion, compared to PlayStation. I just don't think there's as many big draws, right? Halo Infinite was supposed to be that big hook, right? Like you got to be an early adopter. You got to get this console so you can play this game. You know what I mean? And that's gone now. So the interviewer brought up the fact of potentially, he asked Phil specifically, would you guys be interested in shipping the multiplayer separate from the single player? And of course, Phil said that, it's something that they're interested in, or not interested in, but something that, he's not ruling out or whatever.
He said if they could do it right, I believe they would do it if they could do it right.
Yeah.
They want to make sure they do it right.
What do you think about that?
I think that's fine, but clearly something happened with the development of Halo Infinite because it's 100% supposed to be a launch title. They advertise it as such. The Xbox Series X box has Master Chief on the back. I mean, obviously that's their staple franchise, but why would you advertise a game so heavily on your new console if you can't even get it? Grandmas are going to go and get their grandsons the console and go, well, where's Halo? Where's it at? I want it,
Yeah.
So in terms of them shipping the multiplayer and single player separate, it'd be like, I don't know, man. It's like, in my opinion, don't put it out until it's all one package ready to go. But at the same time, it is like the future of gaming. We're doing things we've never done before. Things are so different. You have certain games like Call of Duty where Warzone is like an application as itself. and it carries itself over. So Black Ops Cold War is coming out. It's still going to use Warzone. You know what I mean? So we're going into this territory now of the future of gaming. And could it happen? Yeah, absolutely. And Phil said, if we can do it right, we'll do it. So, I'm indifferent. I personally would prefer to have the whole thing at once.
Mm-hmm.
That's just me.
Yeah, I'm kind of indifferent too. I'm a Halo fan, but not since 343 took over. I don't care about Halo Infinite. 343, in my opinion, is just taking the fucking franchise into the ground. And any game that they produce that's better than complete and utter shit is a win for me. I don't give a fuck if they ship it separately or not. I don't care if the game ever comes out or not. I don't care if 343 goes under and they just completely scrapped it and they never allow them to work on the IP again. But I think it makes sense from a business standpoint. Get the game in people's hands. If the multiplayer is ready before the single player or vice versa, why not?
Yeah. And I can almost see the multiplayer aspect of it being like a Warzone, like I compared it to, because how much could you change the Halo formula? People don't want a lot of change.
Right.
So if you released it as like its own standalone thing like that, Halo multiplayer, because isn't the Master Chief Collection very similar where the multiplayer is for all of the Halo games built into one? Like it's like one game, but all the Halo games are there.
Yeah, you have, when you go into the Master Chief Collection, you have like your campaign tab, right? So you can pick any campaign. You have your multiplayer tab. You can cycle through playlists of the different campaigns. Like you can be like, oh, I want to play, Halo 3 and Halo 5, these game modes or whatever, and filter through like that. So they're kind of separate user experiences within the same app.
So why couldn't they just go, here's Halo Infinite's multiplayer. You could play the other ones too if you want. Here's this. I don't know. That's just how I see it.
I understand what you're saying, but I think for them, it's probably more so of like an event type thing, where it's like if Call of Duty, for example, had something similar, it might not sell as well.
I gotcha. I have a hard time visualizing Halo shit because I'm not a Halo person. I never really got into it.
No, it's fine, and I'm so disinterested with the franchise. I really can't stress that enough. Gotcha. But anyway, we can talk about that another time. The last interesting point from this article, something that we've actually talked about on the channel before a really long time ago, and then I think briefly touched on last week, was potential Game Pass, right, or xCloud support on other devices, specifically the Nintendo Switch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Phil pretty much said, if we were going to launch games on other consoles, I would want it to be the full Xbox ecosystem, the full Xbox experience. So, like, for example, imagine if Ori and Cuphead weren't on the Switch already, and Phil was basically like, look, Nintendo, if you want any of our games on your console, you got to put Game Pass on there. And there'd be like a Game Pass app on the Switch, which was a rumor, actually. People were saying that. And that's what I think you're referring to. Yeah. Is that Game Pass was coming to Switch, or there was rumors that it was coming to Switch.
Yeah.
So we talked about it last week, in that Game Pass is such a great, great service. And it's almost like an EA Play or whatever it's called, EA Early Access or whatever the fuck it's called.
Yeah.
It's like that, where you could just, play your games, and it's like a subscription service. So that on the Switch would be sick. Basically, any game that's a part of Xbox Game Pass, if there's a Switch equivalent, you'd be able to play it for free.
Right. I think something like that makes more sense for Nintendo than it does Xbox.
You mean PlayStation?
No. I'm saying specifically related to the Switch.
Okay.
If they were to put the Game Pass app on there, to me, that'd be a great spot for it. Xbox doesn't have, a handheld portable thing.
Yep.
They have, Game Pass and xCloud for your phone, and PC, and things like that, which you can obviously take on the go. But as far as like a all-in-one, handheld user experience, no peripherals required, that's the place for it, right? Mm-hmm. And you can get people into that ecosystem a little bit more and just kind of expand your library, almost like a third-party publishing type thing. Whereas Xbox, sure, it'd be great for them to get maybe more subscriptions, for Game Pass, Ultimate or whatever. But it's not like they need, kind of like going back to the first point is like it's not their ecosystem, right? They don't need to release on that something outside of their ecosystem to be profitable.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing we didn't touch on was one of the other things that Phil said he wanted to be there was like achievement support. Right. So he wants like that full Xbox experience on another platform if it's going to happen.
Right.
So I don't know. I think that it'd be really cool. I'd really like it if xCloud, Game Pass, if all of that came to Switch, I'd be in heaven.
Yeah. No, I'm 100% with you.
Hey, did you know this video is actually part of a larger podcast? Check out our latest episode of Hapticast by clicking here.